something completely different.
Happy Hour. Happy Hour.
What's up? This is Happy Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe. And from 94.5 The Buzz and the Rod Ryan Show, heard every morning in Houston, the one and only Rod Ryan is live on Happy Hour with Ryan Hoppe. What's up, bro?
Hey, dude. Man, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, Ryan.
I appreciate you coming on. So I first found your show back in high school, right around when the iHeartMedia app began, and you had all the replay channels. And I've been listening for about 14 years now. And what I've always liked is your fast-paced manner on air, because I have ADHD, so I'm not a big fan of shows that are on one topic for 30 minutes. So it's always helping out my ADHD when I'm driving around listening to your show.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, we try to keep it pretty fast-paced. I mean, you got to think about it in the morning. There's so much competition, and everybody's out there, fighting for listenership. So my goal has always been to, keep it moving. If something's not working, get on to the next thing. But, it's a lot different than podcasting. What you do, you're doing something that's really long form. I'm dealing with such a short window of people in the morning. So, the pacing is just so much different than doing a podcast.
What is the radio scene like in Houston when it comes to competition? Because here in Tampa Bay, it's like Bubba versus Calta. It's all this like shows around here where it's like constant, like it's like a war mindset. Is that what it's like in Houston, or is it a bit different?
No, Tampa is. I know about Tampa. I know the names that you had mentioned and stuff. I don't know. Tampa's trapped in some sort of a weird time warp with all of that, all of that radio fighting and stuff like that. I mean, it might go back all the way to Howard Stern, where he was, he would, come into a market, and then once he became number one, he'd do the whole, he'd do a funeral for the other radio station. And I don't know, Tampa never let go of that. Radio has changed over time. And Tampa does not seem to be affected by that change at all.
What's the biggest change, let's say, you've seen in radio over the past 5 to 10 years? What's like the first thing you think of?
Oh, easily. I mean, the internet. I mean, even though the internet's older than that, but it's constantly evolving and stuff. My job is from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., wake people up here in Houston. And then you've got to manage these social media accounts that are 24/7. They never turn off. And I'm not bitching about it. I'm just saying that is such a huge difference. These guys from years past, they could be these anonymous people that were on the radio. And again, none of this is meant to sound like I'm complaining, but your face is out there, and your voice is out there. Clips of your show are out there, and it's important because you have to do that now, because you just got to kind of keep up, and that does nothing but improves your brand and gets your name and your face in front of more people. But it wasn't like that before. And you did your radio show, you worked on your radio show, you worked on the bits for the next day, and then you were kind of done, and you came in and did it all over again. Now you have these social media accounts that need babysitting 24/7, and it's nonstop.
This is something I've asked a lot of people in radio that began in the 90s, because it's a concept that fascinates me. What do you think it would have been like when you first got into radio? What would it have been like if social media was as crazy as it is now, if it was like that in the 90s?
We would not have done half of what we did on the radio. I mean, you mentioned Tampa, there's some legendary shows there, and stuff was just wild back then. I'm glad that there's not a whole lot of video trail and picture trail of the things that we did on the air in the 90s. I mean, everyone was doing that shock jock thing, and it was really, really different. I'm glad that there's not a paper trail of all the crazy shit we did on the radio.
How crazy were like events for the radio station. Because when I worked at the boat for 7 years, around 2015 to 2018, before COVID, the events were pretty crazy. But people would say, oh man, in the 90s, you had to see radio events then. What was like the craziest thing that you want to talk about that happened at one of your events, maybe in the 90s or 2000s?
Well, I was in New Orleans doing mornings. And I was doing afternoons in the late 90s, and then 2000 I started doing mornings. And it was different back then. Plus, New Orleans was a smaller market, and you didn't have the microscope on you as much. New Orleans is kind of a party city. I mean, Ron Jeremy turned 50, and I remember he happened to be in town for something. Ron Jeremy was this famous porn star back in the day.
Fat guy.
And I remember getting a hold of his people, and we said, hey, we'd like to have him in. Would he think of coming in the morning? And they're like, well, Ron likes girls and Ron likes food. I'm like, okay, I can arrange for both of those. And back in the day for the morning show, you could do that. You could call up the local strip joint. Can I get, you got to book 6 girls for 2 or 3 of them to show up. And then, I remember having it catered and stuff. And then there's just naked chicks running around. And we were just trying to keep him on the air for as long as possible. He canceled his flight. He stayed late. He didn't leave. We couldn't get rid of him. We went out after the show with him. I mean, just stuff like that happened all the time.
You know what I want to ask you? So I worked on some pretty crazy shows, but I always had to be asleep by 9 or 10 because of my ADHD. I need proper sleep to speak right and to just be able to get up. Were you one of those guys back in the day during your craziest days that you could be up until 1 and then get up at 4?
My crazy days were when I was doing afternoon drive. I mean, there were days that in New Orleans, I showed up the next day, and my boss said, you were wearing that yesterday. So, and then, he took a chance on me to get me to do mornings. And that, you had to settle down. I mean, the one thing about mornings is you got to have that discipline, and I deal with that. I've been doing it for, 25 years now. And younger people on the show, they've come and they've gone, and I just tell them, I'm like, listen, it'll catch up to you. You got to have that discipline. And it's tough when, because you want young people on the show because they bring that energy and stuff, and you want, different thoughts and different ideas. But everyone's not built for it. So I was so respectful. I was so honored that I was doing mornings. It had always been a dream of mine. And I always had that, like I could get fired tomorrow mentality. So there were a couple of times, that I went out and probably stayed out a lot later than I should have. But for the most part, once morning started, I felt it was a huge responsibility, probably more than that I needed to look into it. But I really took it seriously, and I really, really tried to buckle down. And, and that's tough when you're 30 years old. And you're in New Orleans and you're single. It wasn't always easy, but for the most part, like you, but I need about 6 hours of sleep, and I still get about 6 hours of sleep.
The absolute worst is if like your friends call you. I end up having to put my phone on Do Not Disturb because either my friends will call me wanting to go out, or if a girl from Bumble calls me and is like, what are you doing? Like, I literally am so disciplined. I missed the Super Bowl 2 years ago in 2023, the Eagles and Chiefs game, because I had to be up at 4. And I was like, there's no way I can stay up. I've always found the Super Bowl to be fascinating the next morning in morning radio, because you can always tell who's tired, who's hungover, and who was able to sleep well,
Yeah, it's a bit of a catch-22 because you're expected to be on the air. You're expected to be talking about it. You can't talk about something that you didn't see. The whole world is talking about it. So that's one of those things where you kind of got to – there's a difference now. There's a difference. You can watch the Super Bowl and not party. It's not as fun, But if you are working the next day, you got to have a little bit of discipline.
What is it like being a prominent figure in Houston? Does it ever get overwhelming? Like, is there ever a time, like, maybe you just want to go, like here in Florida, we have Publix, that's our grocery store, and I'll maybe get recognized 1 in 100 times I go there, but you're a prominent figure in Houston. Do you ever, like, go out and you just want to be left alone?
It's not, we're not getting rushed by fans and things like that. It's not like Beatlemania or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's nice. I mean, I'll tell you what, it's weirder. It's weirder to go out somewhere and no one say anything to you.
Yeah.
Where you're like, Jesus Christ, what the heck, man? Am I losing it? Like nobody's saying anything. I mean, I don't know. Anybody that says that they don't like that, they got to be nuts. I mean, my dad was the hardest working guy in the world. He worked in a factory his whole life. I mean, do you think anybody ran up to my dad and asked him, can I get a picture?
Yeah.
And hey, shook his hand and said, hey man, great job building those cars yesterday. He didn't have that. So for anyone to say that they don't like that, now, I'm out and people are very respectful. I'm out with my daughter a lot, and they know her now. I talk about her on the air. And I do put her pictures out there from time to time. She's a bit of a celebrity. She signed an autograph. Now that was weird. Okay, she's 6, and she signed somebody's shirt recently, and I thought that was a little crazy. But a little bit of a proud papa moment. But it's never. Listen, if I tell people, and I'll tell people on the air, because sometimes they'll say, hey, I saw you at the grocery store, and I didn't want to bother you, but I just wanted you to know I saw you. And, I'll read that email on the air, and I'll just say, this goes for everybody on the show. If you're going to work for me, work with me. Hey, you see us out, if we're not like with our families or if we're sitting at a dinner, that's different. But if we're out, come up and say hi. Come up and get the picture. Now I will just, when somebody says hi to me, I'll just tell them, hey, let's take a picture. I know they got a phone on them. And, sometimes, I mean, rarely, but sometimes people say, nah, that's okay. But 99% of the time, they're like, yeah, let's do that. And they don't want to ask. So I just get ahead of it now. I just say, let's take a picture. Why not? Again, I have a hard time with anybody that, how could that not make you feel good? That somebody wanted to come up and say hi to you. And most of the time, I mean, I don't get people coming up and bitching about things. I get people coming up being very complimentary. It's a really nice way to go through life.
And another thing I want to ask you as well is, like, do you ever get overwhelmed by, like, having to get up every morning and doing a show, like, in the way that, has there ever been a time that it was like an incredibly slow news day and you're just thinking to yourself, what am I going to talk about?
Every single day. I'm not lying. It's a sickness. That's every day of my life. I over prepare. I'm a paper guy. I've got highlighters. I've got Post-it notes. I got shit everywhere. My biggest fear is to turn on the microphone and not have something to say. So I am always way over prepped with stuff. And I don't know if my co-host went out last night or if the sports guy went out last night. And sometimes there's been those days and I can't rely on them. It's, my name's on the show. And I might be working up a big topic, and then, an old co-host leans into the mic and just says, yep. It's like, shit, they're not talking? Great, it's on me. You just got to be prepared for that every day. So I'm just a guy that just over prepares every single day. And, I'm a planner, and that's a nightmare of mine, going into work and thinking that, oh, my God, I don't know what I'm going to say today.
Now, what got you into radio?
The short answer is a failed wannabe rock star. I played the drums back in the day. This is the story of a lot of old DJs. They thought they were going to be, some sort of a half-assed rock star, and I was playing with my band in Buffalo, New York, and we had some interest in a label, and then they just kind of passed on us, and I just kind of said, you know what, we're not that good. Nirvana had already hit. We were doing shit that didn't sound like that, and there was just a change. And so I went in and I quit the band, and I went to school, and I went to college, and it was simply me saying, and I've said this before, if I can't be a rock star, maybe I can interview rock stars.
Yeah.
And I went to school for broadcasting, and I guess the rest is history.
I went to a radio trade school as well. The funny part was all we learned was how to use Adobe Audition. That was basically all they taught us.
Well, you are obviously a little younger than me. In college, I learned how to put a record on a turntable.
Oh my goodness.
Drop the needle and back it off about 6 inches so that it would start cleanly on the air. So, I mean, the thing about radio and college, which, I went to a 2-year school and I worked at the college radio station, and then I went on to get my 4-year degree at Buffalo State College. You can't, you know this, you can't teach somebody to be on the radio. You can't teach somebody you can't give somebody a personality. You can teach them, like you said, Adobe Audition and how to use the equipment and stuff like that. But you can't teach somebody to be interesting. You can't teach somebody to retain stupid knowledge and remember dumb movie quotes. You can't teach that. It's just got to be in you. The thing about college is, you learn to think for yourself a little bit, and that's probably the best thing I got out of it.
Where did you go to school?
So I went to just outside of Niagara Falls, New York. I went to Niagara County Community College, and that's where that was the most important schooling that I had. That was basically 13th and 14th grade.
Yeah.
And I worked at the radio station there, and that's where I got my internship. And, and that changed the whole trajectory of my life. I did decide to go on to Buffalo State College and got my 4-year degree. But by then I had already been working in radio. So it was I just wanted to finish that degree. It was important for me just to show that I could finish something, so what did I get out of it? I don't know, but it just proves that I could finish something.
To me, college radio is some of the most exciting parts of anybody who's in radio as a part of their life, because I did a community college show from 2012 to 2013, and then I kind of snuck on to Northwestern University at WNUR, and a lot of it was very edgy. It was me trying to be cool at 19 or 20, but I learned so much about board hopping and everything that whenever people ask me about like how to get into radio, I say try to get in at one of your local community colleges, because you can pretty much, for the most part, do what you want.
Yeah, college radio for me was a little bit different. I mean, the community college experience, we had our own show, and that's where I met a buddy of mine, which we did so much of our careers mirrored one another. We moved around the country together. But when I got to Buffalo State College, I found those college kids. Buffalo State had a really good radio station, WBNY. It was a little kind of famous. Yeah. Tom Calderone started it up, and he was this alternative guru back in the day. And I found them to be so pretentious. I had already been working part-time at the rock station, and it was a rock station. I mean, Tampa is a rock town. It was Def Leppard and Dokken and, Ozzy. And, the people at the college station, they're like, oh, why would you work there? I said, because I actually make money doing it. You're sitting there and you're playing the Dead Milkmen and Enema Milkshake for free. I said, I'm working at a real radio station that people actually listen to, and I'm getting paid. And I just didn't get along with them very well. They worshiped at a different altar than me.
Yeah, I got into trouble in community college radio. This is right around the time that this was in 2013. So it was right around when they got the new Pope. and they had that whole ceremony where they were just like on the news showing the like church but not doing anything. Do you remember that? Like whenever they get a new pope or whatever. And I made
they burn the votes, and then you wait to see what color the smoke is.
Yes. And pretty much what happened was my boss was Catholic, but he was never around. So I didn't think he listened. The one day he listened, I said, whatever. It's just going to be another pope that covers up child touchers or something. And
God.
Yeah, my boss wasn't too happy about that because I grew up being forced to go to a church. My parents were Roman Catholic, so it was every Sunday. My dad, even after Lent, would not eat meat on Friday. So I'm pretty much anti-religion to a point. But yeah, I would not have said that now. It was just crazy because like I didn't think anybody was listening, but somebody heard it, Rod.
Yeah, I did a game one Easter, crucifixion or crucifaxion, and
that's amazing.
I played that game one time.
Oh my God, that's great. That's funny. Is there any bits like, do you ever think about a bit from like '02, maybe when you're in New Orleans or something, and you're like, there is just no way I could do that now?
A million of them. I mean, most of the shit we did, most of the stuff we did, we just couldn't do it. One I'll talk about, we had our third guy on the show. He was going, it was called Sex in Front of Your Ex.
Yeah.
And so, we were in with a limo company and they were cool with it. And people applied, I don't know, I don't know if they sent emails. They must have just called in. And some guy got divorced and his wife got the house. His wife got everything. He was ruined. And he had a new girlfriend, and the whole thing was like, okay, well, you're going to have sex in front of your ex. So they were in the limousine, and my radio guy was in the passenger seat, and they had the privacy glass up. And the listener proceeded to have sex with his new girlfriend in the limo parked in front of his old house.
Oh my God, that's very similar.
And then you got my guy on the radio laughing his ass off, and the cars bouncing up and down and everything. I mean, just live on the air, just silly. Anything that popped into our heads. Our bosses really kind of let us go back then, and some stuff we got in trouble for, some stuff we got away with, and nothing ever happened to us. So. That's what they wanted us to do. They wanted us to be outrageous. That's what radio sounded like back then.
Yeah, I remember.
And it just, if you could think it up, try it. Like we just never got in trouble. Well, that's not true. We didn't get in trouble like you would get in trouble today.
Did you ever get a fine?
Yeah, we got slapped with something. Yeah, I don't know. They kind of kept that stuff away from us. Yeah, they definitely had to pay some money.
Yeah,
for something. There were some games that we played, and somebody said that they owned it. I can't remember. There was definitely.
Yeah,
there was a slush fund for that though. Like they'd made jokes like, oh yeah, we've got money. We have a slush fund for that sort of thing. Like they knew we were going to get in trouble. They said that they had money put aside if we got arrested,
Well, I know I've heard every Gen X radio personality say that the 2004 Nipplegate ruined everything.
It changed the world. It absolutely, it changed everything. I mean, they went after Bubba in Tampa for things that he did the year before, like it didn't, I don't even know that I can articulate it to your audience. I don't know that I can explain it to my audience. All I can tell you is that it happened here in Houston. I was at the game. Justin Timberlake peeled off a part of Janet Jackson's top, exposed her nipple.
I saw it.
Not a great nipple, but all right. It's okay. It was all right. What people don't, I was at the game.
Yeah.
And I thought, because I had to work the next day, and what I thought was going to be the big story, nobody remembers this, there was a streaker. And we couldn't see what happened at the end of, it happened so quickly. What you guys saw on TV, I saw like ants, on the field.
Yeah.
So I thought the big story was going to be that streaker. And, I was prepared to talk about all the things that I'd seen the night before and all of that stuff. And then, seeing the wire service and everything, I'm like, oh God, I had just moved here.
Yeah.
I had just moved here in 2004. So I'm still kind of doing the same shock jockey shit.
Yeah.
For the first month I'm here. In my first 30 days here in Houston in 04, because you're talking about the 04 Super Bowl.
Yes.
So in my first 30 days, I had already done a promotion where people were drinking Ipecac to throw up in the studio to win a date with a porn star at the Bunny Ranch in Nevada. This is in my first 30 days. I had already given away a trip to Dennis Hoff used to work with all the radio stations, all the shock jocks back in the day. In that first 30 days, I'm here in Houston. This is the new guy. He's outrageous, blah, blah, blah. I give away a trip to the Bunny Ranch. Dennis Hoff is on, all that. And then the nipple comes out, and all of a sudden, a whole new set of rules happened. No more strippers in the studio. No more this, no more that. Somehow, a nipple on a television set prompted the FCC to go after indecency on the radio. And I don't know that I can explain it, but that's exactly what they did. And that's it. Everybody changed. And if you couldn't adapt, if you couldn't pivot, if that's all you did was, we call that working blue.
Yeah.
With all that dirty dick jokes and, chicks. If you couldn't pivot and do an entertaining show, you didn't make it. There was guys that's all they did. And, you had to come up with other ways to be entertaining, and it was a good thing. It was, looking back, I thought, oh my God, radio sucks now. We can't do anything fun. It made you think differently. It made you get creative in different ways, just not the same old way of thinking. So it changed things dramatically, but not for the worse. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with the censorship of the whole thing and how they attacked radio. Still, it's mind-boggling to me, but it made me change for the better, and it made me start thinking about how am I going to make a career of this. If I want to do this long term, I got to start thinking differently.
Well, yeah, and the thing too is I don't even know if people would want to hear 2004 humor now,
No way. There's some sensitive ears out there. So,
oh yeah,
it's a little different. And it's fine. It's okay. When we look at the ratings here, when I was in New Orleans and we were doing all that shit on the air, they flat out told me, we don't care if one woman listens to this radio station. We have a station for that. We have a CHR down the hall. Let them do what they do. You do what you do.
Yeah.
So they didn't care if I pissed off every woman in the world. They didn't care. They just said, you're going to be, we need men 18 to 34. You bring me men 18 to 34, we'll pay you. We'll bonus you. We'll take care of you. And that's what they wanted. And that was shitty thinking on their part too, because all you got to do is just be a little bit more mass appeal. Don't piss off. It's the same thing. It's like politics. Why would you go one direction and not the other? And why would you piss off half your audience? For them to tell me that they didn't care that if we had one female listening to our station sounded like a good idea at the time, but now it's so archaic to think that way,
Yeah, I definitely think you guys, Preston and Steve, are like some of the few shows that like went from doing that dirty humor, especially when I've read about this online because I was a bit younger, but when PPM came in, you couldn't even do that same type of humor with the way that the ratings were set.
Yeah, the PPM changed a whole nother thing. Not so much the content, more like you were talking off the beginning, the speed of what you do and how quickly you're overturning things and You're playing all these different, radio games, and you're fighting for the quarter hours and things like that. It changed the playing field for sure.
Now, what do you think about the Radio Hall of Fame? Does it mean anything to you?
Oh yeah, I mean it's amazing. I mean, I don't think I have no delusions of getting into the Radio Hall of Fame. I just don't have a syndicated show. Even though everybody, like you said, you listen on iHeartRadio. I mean, almost everybody's syndicated now. But, we have a Texas Radio Hall of Fame, and there's some pretty big names in there going all the way up to Wolfman Jack. And I would be lying to you if I told you that I didn't want, my name in there somewhere at some point.
Now, before I let you go, I want to ask you, what do you think is the future of radio?
Well, I think there's things that I'm hopeful for. There's things that I'm worried about. The things that I always want to be positive. Radio is strong. I don't have like the hard numbers in front of me, but I know a couple of things that I know. 88% of people listen to terrestrial radio on a weekly basis, and AM FM radio, it's somewhere like 91% of U.S. adults every month. People think that radio is dead, or I've heard that before.
Yeah.
I'm not saying all people, but I'm sure you've come across them as well.
Oh yeah.
And the guy said, "Oh my God, this happened to me." This is a true story. I've told this several times on my show. I said I had a guy. I have a golf tournament a couple times a year, a lot of charity events, and a guy comes up to me at the dinner. He's like, "Brother Rod," like, "Holy cow, man, you're still on the radio." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Man, that's awesome." He goes, "How long you been on now?" And I don't know. At that time, it was like 19 years.
Yeah.
He goes, "Man, I listened to you in high school, but I mean, radio's got to be in trouble, huh?" Now, you're like, well, why is he golfing in your tournament? Like, his friend was a big listener still. So and I just said, I go, take out your phone. He goes, "What?" I go, "Give me your phone." So he takes out his phone. I go, "Dude, that's a fucking radio." I go, "That's a radio."
Yeah. Yeah.
I go, "Podcasts, that's a radio. Our website, all of our social media sites, that's all a part of my radio show." I go, "It's radio." So I said, "What do you?" He's like, "Oh, well, I have a Spotify. I listen to Spotify or whatever."
Yeah.
I go, Did you ever make a human connection with Spotify?" "What do you mean?" "Well, I said, Spotify ever answer a question of yours, or did Spotify ever say anything funny? Did Spotify ever connect with you in any way in between a song?" He said, "Well, no, it's just my music." And I said, "Okay." I said, people want human connection, and they still want that. Even you doing your podcast, and you're seeing, the explosion of podcasts, which is still, just growing and growing. People want a human connection.
Yeah.
And I think radio does that, and I think morning radio is one of the last places, and then AM talk. It's one of these last places where people want to hear that. They want to hear you connect. They want to hear you talk. They want to hear your thoughts on things. They want to be invited to the party. The phone line's always open. Rod's always reading emails and everything, and I want to make sure that they're included in that party. Pandora and Apple Music, and it doesn't connect like that. It just does not make the connection. Sure, if you just want to listen to music, I can't out-music anybody. I can't. I got commercials that I got to play. I want to talk. I got to play some songs, but I got to stick to, my clock. I can't out music you. If that's all you want in the morning, great, but that's not what most people want. So that's what makes me excited about radio, that I think that there's still people that want to connect. I grew up listening to the radio, and it was a magic box to me.
Yeah,
it was a magic box. And I have the radio in my house here that I grew up listening to in Buffalo, and it was magical. And I still feel like it can make that connection, and I still feel like my goal is to make that connection. Because I think about, it's amazing that I'm able to do what I do because I grew up listening to the radio, and the radio meant everything to us in our house. And I didn't know that I was always going to do it. I never thought that, geez, that's just for other people. I don't know who gets to be on the radio. But that's what I think is exciting, that I think as long as that we can still, the sad part of it is I don't know who we're cultivating. The farm system in radio is not good.
Not at all.
And my company, which is the largest media company in the U.S., iHeartRadio, we are not doing a good job of cultivating the next generation. And there were all these weekenders and part-timers and all this stuff when I was getting started, and that is non-existent. With voice tracking and everything else, there is no farm system, and I don't know where the next radio star is coming from.
That will be me, Rod. No, I'm just kidding, but seriously. Before I let you go, Rod, how can people find your work? How can they listen if they're not in Houston with 94.5 on the radio?
You can always listen live just by logging on to thebuzz.com. You did a great job. Thank you for mentioning the iHeartRadio app, which, listen, I don't shit on my company. I get it. We got the biggest target on our back. The iHeartRadio app, every radio company owes iHeart a favor for doing what they did and showing how to do it and get all these radio stations up and running so you can listen to them on one single app. It's really, it's been such a game changer. If you go to iHeartRadio, I mean, we have 850 some radio stations of our own, and then we have these other people that are on our platform as well. So you can just look up The Rod Ryan Show. Thebuzz.com. Everything on social is at Rod Ryan Show.
Now, would I be able to get you to do a quick liner saying, hey, this is Rod Ryan and you're listening to Hoppe Hour?
All right. Hi, this is Rod Ryan from The Rod Ryan Show in Houston, Texas, and you're listening to The Hoppe Hour.
Rod, that was amazing. This is very surreal. I don't want to kiss your ass, but I've been listening for about 14 years, and I hated high school. I would go into the computer lab during lunch. I would save the $8 my mom gave me for lunch every day and use it on beer on the weekend. And I would just sit in the library, and I would listen to iHeartRadio shows. And your show was one of my big influences on going into radio. So having you on the show has been very surreal. So I appreciate it, Rod Ryan.
That's really nice of you, man. I appreciate it, Ryan. Can I tell you that you were very well prepped? You kept things moving. I know podcasting, sometimes I listen to them and they can be real tedious and they can be slow moving, and there's a lot, it's a different animal, and sometimes there's a lot of air and it's hard to explain, but there's a lot of air sometimes in podcasts. Dude, you kept it moving along. You did a great job, man. It was my pleasure. Are
you going to the morning show boot camp radio conference?
I'm not a separatist or anything like that. There's guys that I really look up to in the industry, and I know that they go to that stuff, and it just doesn't fit into my schedule.
I feel that. I'm going to the one in Austin this year. I was just curious, but
yeah, because it's in Austin, that's a drive for me. It's not like I got to.
Yeah, I've never been there.
Fly to Chicago. Austin's a great town. It's really fun. When is it?
It's like August 5th through 7th, I believe.
I don't know. I've never gone, but one of these days I got to show my face there, so maybe I will.
Well, Rod, it's been a lot of fun having you on the show. Thank you again, and keep up the good work. I will be listening.
Thanks, Ryan. Thank you so much, man. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you, Rod.
All right, goodbye.
And that was Rod Ryan of the Rod Ryan Show on 94.5 The Buzz in Houston. Now, if you want to hear my show, you're already listening on the Hoppe Radio podcast platform now you're listening on. If it's Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Spreaker, Apple. So check out my show. It's kind of, I hate the word morning zoo, but it's kind of a morning zoo vibe with just me playing celebrity news clips and playing throwback hip hop. It's very similar to Rod Ryan. I have a friend from Houston who actually listens to my show and compared me to Rod. So go to every single major platform and search up Hoppe Radio, Hoppe Radio, to listen to Hoppe Hour. This has been Hoppe Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe, signing off.
Tick-tock, clocks a juke, we're playing cruel pranks. Hoppy's hour almost done, feels like robbery in banks. Ryan Hoppy on the mic, dropping wisdom in streams. Syndicated sorrow, now it's time to shatter dreams. Oh, the Hoppy hour is coming to a close. Radio waves fading like a wilted rose. Laughter and joy dissolving in the air, but we'll keep the rhythm. Oh, life's just so unfair. But the laughter's growing dim. Eardrums mixing Hoppy like fingers without rings. DHX to FM, shout out hit the street. But soon the sound will vanish like shadows in the heat. Oh, the Hoppy hour is coming to a close. Radio waves fading like a wilting rose. Laughter and joy dissolving in the air, but we'll keep the rhythm. Oh, life's just so unfair. Phone lines buzzing, but the laughter's growing dim. Eardrums mixing Hoppy like fingers without rings. DHX to FM, shoutouts hit the street. But soon the sound will vanish like shadows in the heat. Oh, the Hoppy hour is coming to a close. Radio waves fading like a wilting rose. Laughter and joy dissolving in the air, but we'll keep the rhythm. Oh, life's just so unfair. Oh, life's just so unfair. Every night like clockwork to a show. Now it's time to face the silence like a TV on snow. Riot Hoppy held the mic with humor so divine. The void left in our hearts wider than a canyon line. Empty speakers silent, time but coming to an end. Like a roller coaster stopping round the river's bend. Hoppy's jokes and jabs, these our daily grind. Now silence louder than the thoughts we can't rewind. Oh, the Hoppy hour is coming to a close. Radio waves fading like a wilting rose. Laughter and joy dissolving in the air, but we'll keep the rhythm. Oh, life's just so unfair. The Hoppy hour is coming to a close. Radio waves fading like a wilting rose. Laughter and joy dissolving in the air, but we'll keep the rhythm. Oh, life's just so unfair.
Happy Hour. Happy Hour.
RyanHoppyRadio.com.
And like that, he's gone.
Whenever we're going outside, all I smell is poop.
I'll kick you in the nuts and we'll call it a day.
Happy Hour is now over. Happy Hour is now over. Game over.
This concludes our broadcast day. Good night, and God bless America.
Doors closing.
Please don't be offended. He's sorry in advance.
From Chicago to Cleveland to Tampa Bay, you are plugged into Happy Hour.
Turn on the show with Henry and Ryan. Pop trivia questions, yeah, no lying. Got my mind sharp like a blade that's flying. They asking those questions, got my brain frying. Hammer and Hank's got the mic up high. Pop hits playing to the end of the sky. Gotta keep it real, can't let it slide. Answers in my head, can't let them hide. Pop trivia, yeah,